Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Discovery Wednesday with Guy Finley. We're glad you're here. Hello to everyone in the room joining us, and hello to all of you online. It's just so nice to have all of us together tonight for these self-discovery classes. And on Wednesday night, Self-Discovery Wednesday, it is time to discover more and more about ourselves. So glad everyone's here tonight. My name is Leah. And if you're new to our format, Guy gives about 1 hour talk tonight, and then we take a 5-minute break, at which time you can stretch your legs, and then please come back and join us after the break for the live Q&A. That's when you have the opportunity to ask Guy a question. Students in the room get up and make a comment, share what they've seen or have questions about the talk. And we look forward to you joining us for that part of the class tonight as well. If you have any technical issues, comments, questions, you can always go to the chat area and write them in there on whatever platform you're in. And Kate's behind the scenes. She will check those out and relay whatever we need to see to us. And for everyone in the classroom, please turn your phones off. And I think that covers everything. We can get started. I'm going to read the title and the key lesson for tonight's class. The title is Wake Up and Walk Away from Your Constant Conflict with Unwanted Moments. The key lesson reads, the fear of what may lie just ahead, does not exist without the unconscious parts of us clinging painfully to what no longer serves the purpose for which it was originally created. I'm going to read the key lesson again. The fear of what may lie just ahead does not exist without the unconscious parts of us clinging painfully to what no longer serves the purpose for which it was originally created.
Good evening, everyone. My pause was that my mind had thrown a picture up on the screen of my consciousness dealing with this idea of something that no longer serves the purpose for which it was created. And I thought of someone who had gotten a really large belly trying to squeeze into pants size 32. No personal reference intended. First, a quick note about the key lesson. What we call karma is our unseen resistance to the unfinished remains of our Divine Father. What we call karma is our resistance to finishing what hasn't been finished and that we are asked to finish. You are asked to outgrow who and what you have been. Who and what you have been does not serve you. You serve it, and you don't understand that at all. We talked briefly several times about this idea of an invisible order of things and how important it was to realize that the invisible order of life is far greater than the things within that order, but that as human beings we're created with the capacity to understand that order so intimately that we understand we're a part of it. And in the understanding that we're a part of that order, to finally begin entering into a kind of special humility that allows us to stop resisting what that order asks of us as a part of it. Do you understand that? On Wednesdays, we call them Discovery Wednesdays every other week, and the other 2 weeks we call Deep Dive Wednesdays. Discovery Wednesdays are an opportunity for the men and women in the room and everybody out there joining us, no matter what platform you're participating in, as long as it's live on Wednesday, to study a topic that, as we do, we can see where we share so much in common with absolutely very little idea that we have these things in common. And in particular, when it comes to this idea of what it means to cling so painfully and constantly to things that, in spite of all of our efforts to keep everything tied down or corrected, change nothing about the conflict that we meet in life. It just goes on and on and on. The true reason for a truth school is to introduce to the minds of the men and women who find it a new understanding of what order is. And the only way that a man or a woman can come into a new understanding of what the order of things is by seeing it and entering into it. You can't understand order by thinking about it. Thought by its nature may be put in order, but it by its nature is incomplete from the order it says it understands. We need a new understanding of order, and please listen to me, including the understanding that whatever it is that is expressed through that order is itself an expression of the forces that bring that order into existence. So that wherever there's order, there is a divine order of principles and powers that act to produce the experience of that order. You don't know order without the experience of it. Thought is not the experience of order. The experience of order, for instance, is when you look out and see occasionally today the sun would come out and everything that had been washed so clean. Yesterday I was at the golf course late afternoon, and there were these candles of colored flame coming out of these wooden candles, trees that had changed. You look at something like that, and in that absolute beauty, an understanding exists in it. And what is the understanding in beauty like that? What do you think the understanding is in beauty like that you can't think about?
No difference.
Real beauty is incomparable. It's incomparable. That means for a split second, standing there looking at what you're looking at, there's no you deciding this looks good, or that should be this way, or why are the leaves on the ground, or that tree could be a little better shaped. There's no you slid into that special moment where the observer and the observed experience something at once that doesn't create a time when things should be different or when you will own something like that, but an incomparable moment because it has no time in it. That's what a truly incomparable moment is. It is a timeless moment. And it is a timeless moment because there's nothing up here between these two ears called human consciousness creating something from it that gives it a sense of self as the observer who loves this or who loves that. There's just the purity of a timeless understanding. You understand me? All right. Let's get into this a little bit. I'm going to bring you in a few moments. We're going to make a list and we're going to check it twice because Santa Claus is coming. He wants to know if you've been naughty or nice. Have you ever noticed how, well, first of all, to make sure I'm talking to the right group of people, how many of you have a lot of unwanted moments on a daily basis? Have you ever noticed, and I don't know if you have or haven't, I'm just bringing this up, how you can have 15 or 20 different unwanted moments in a day, yes or no? And they're so different in scope. It can be learning, the doctor calling you, sorry guy, you got 3 months. It could be that dramatic, or it could be, sorry guy, somebody ate the last ice cream bar out of the freezer. It could be anything like that, please. But in spite of the immense scope of difference between these unwanted moments, how the immediate feeling of resisting that moment is invariably the same, no matter what the nature of that moment is. Please, do you see that? I have 10,000 different things I don't want in any given day. And they're as different as cows and cupcakes. But the feeling is always the same. Why? Look, how many times do you have the feeling of, I don't want this? Well, how many times do you have to have the feeling of, I don't want him, her, this, that, this moment, that future, that past? How many times do you have to have that moment before you realize, you know what? It's all these different moments, but it is the exact same nature. Because if you had that revelation, to whatever extent possible, but that's why we're meeting, you would start asking yourself, well, how many different ways can I feel the same resentment? The same resistance? How many different ways can I feel the same fear when it's always the same fear, always the same resistance, always the same resentment? And it is. It's just degrees. The content is not different at all. I'm asking you out loud, yes or no? So, this immediate sense of resisting the moment in which, no matter how deep, dark, long, or short that may be, it is this sudden feeling of carrying a load of bricks. I'm doing hard time again. How many of you do hard time multiple times a day? What is that about? One of the problems is this, I just have to call it out, is that you just kind of go along with it. You can say no sitting here in the atmosphere of the room, but you just go along with it. Whatever it is, that brings up this unwanted moment and this resistance to it, I'm all in. Let me give as many thoughts as needed to bring an end to this pain, because if I just finally think it through enough, go into the future, go back to the past, if I just work to resolve all that, then I'll get past it. And I want you to understand something. You never get past it. What happens is that the mind wearies of its own activity and finally just moves on to another subject. And then you think to yourself, I solved it. Where even if you were able in thought to come to some conclusion, how many times do you have to come to that conclusion to see that your conclusion didn't really change the fact that that resistance and resentment, that fear or worry will be there again tomorrow? Please, yes or no? Let's bring up the second key lesson. I really like this. It requires some thinking. I hope I have the right group of people for this. Let's bring up the second key lesson, please. I don't see it on it's not on my screen. I guess it won't be. Nope. That's the list. We're breaking in some new volunteers tonight. And we're forever getting better. Here is the second key lesson. Please read along with me. I will explain it after we go through it. It says, life clearly reaches no creative conclusion that isn't challenged a moment later by the movement of life itself. This means real life must be the endless exploration of its own infinite revelations. To understand even a little bit of this idea reveals a startling fact. By essence of its nature in time, any conclusion about the timeless nature of real life is false the moment it's reached. Let's go back through it. Life never reaches a conclusion that isn't challenged a moment later by the movement of life itself. Life brings about, it creates something. Does life just stop something where it creates it? Or does life continue to create? So that there's no conclusion to creation, is there? It's just a constant, beautiful circulation of forces bringing about through their interaction something that is born, dies, reborn, and lives again. An endless stream like that. Yes? So that life never concludes anything, does it? What about you? Please, I want you to see the contrast. That real life, if it never reaches a conclusion, what in the name of God is real life doing? We depend on conclusions, don't we? We depend on, and we're looking and say, wait a minute, well, real life never reaches a conclusion. So, am I part of real life if that's all I depend upon is conclusions that eventually become the basis of resisting whatever it is that I don't want? Or could it be that if real life doesn't come to any conclusions in a new form, then that has to mean that life doesn't have and doesn't act to bring about the conclusions that I'm looking to life to bring a conclusion to me. What's the purpose of life? Please, I don't know how I can urge you to think with me. You and I, every day, this mind struggles with what it doesn't want to come to a conclusion about how to get past that conflict. That's all it struggles with. It's incessant. And I'm trying to show you that the incessant struggle of that mind is in complete opposition to the real purpose of life, which isn't to bring about conclusions, but to bring about through infinite revelation this understanding that there is a constant exploration. Life never stops exploring itself. To what end? To what end the endless act of creation? For whose eyes? And I'm trying to get you to see, literally, that this infinite, unending revelation is because it brings about the next creation for whatever is brought into that moment, to explore it and to understand it as a part of itself. Now, the tree can't understand itself as part of this creation, but you and I can look at the seasons. You and I can look and see not what we don't want or what we wish the weather was like or how come we can't go there because this is like that. We have a human being have a chance to understand that in these moments we're being invited to participate in an order of life that we don't understand, and that the only reason we suffer from life the way we do is because we've reached some conclusion as to why this life is the way it is. This is the hardest thing to convey to any human being, ever. That your identity is a derivative of a conclusion that constantly measures the moment and decides whether it's good or bad. That is your experience of life. And that experience of life validates the pain and the pleasure that comes about with reaching a conclusion that promises to bring an end to something or that will lead to the fulfillment of yet another plan by which I'm free somehow. It runs so deep as to be unseen, which is what I want to do with you. I want to show you this tonight. And if I don't get past my opening comments, I'm never going to get into the meat of this. Let's make a list, you and I. We're going to make a transition so we can start understanding the nature of this creation that we are a part of, but that we don't see, and why we don't participate in it, okay? Here's the list. I'm asking you out there to participate, and I'm asking the people in the room to participate as well. What is the list? Read it with me. It says, what is the one main thing, some relationship, condition, or unwanted situation that you often find yourself struggling with, likely on a daily basis? What is the one main thing, some relationship, condition, or unwanted situation that you often find yourself struggling with, likely on a daily basis? I don't know that I need to prime the pump here, but how many of you are anxious on a daily basis? How many of you relive a regret on a daily basis? How many of you have arguments with people on a daily basis? You're getting this? Now, the thing when I say what is the one main thing, the problem is I got a million of them. But I want to know, because each type here will be involved in a particular kind of constant relationship based on their conditioning and experience. What is the one main thing that you find yourself struggling with on a daily basis? Heidi. Judgment. Who else? John.
What's going to happen?
Fear. What's going to happen? Terry. Defensiveness. On the board, Jill says being patient or otherwise impatience. Chris.
Remembering myself.
What is the... Now, dear Chris, I'm going to write a letter. If...
I have a hard time remembering myself. I struggle with
No, what is the main thing that you struggle with? If the main thing you struggled with was remembering yourself, you would remember yourself. Because you'd know, if I'm not remembering myself, I'm in the hands of some other consciousness. So you might have a hard time with it, but that is not the main thing you struggle with. Now, you want to change your answer, just out of curiosity?
Yes, but I don't know to us. with constantly thinking.
How about enemies? How about people that upset me? Control. Roger. Resentment on the board. Gino, needing to be right, big one. Joan says, what should I do now? I'm bored. That's what happens when you move to wherever it is. Who else? Please. Leah.
Getting everything done.
I am my main consternation on every painful is I can't get everything done. I'm always wanting to get things done. Deborah.
Also control, but frustration.
Frustration. How about anger, Deborah? Anybody else? Chris has another one. Rushing. Anxiety, for sure. Rob says anxiety.
Dropping past idea or concept.
She said dropping a past idea, meaning The struggle isn't with dropping the idea. The struggle is with the pain of finding myself reliving whatever that moment is or problem. You understand? You relive your problems on a daily basis. I'm getting at this, Patricia. Worry. That's a big one. Who else? Come on, Barb. Avoidance? Yeah, of course. John. Thinking I know better than Deborah, who also thinks she knows better than I do. It's called marriage. I want a couple more before I go on. Really, how about feeling inadequate? What about guilt? See, for me, what this points out is that you don't know what you struggle with. You just experience moments you don't want. And then you don't know why you don't want them. All you know is that you want something other than the feeling of that conflict and pain in the moment. So there's no beauty. I know it sounds like a paradox. How can there be beauty in what I feel is a brutal moment? Because what I feel is a brutal moment isn't as a result of the moment of life acting on what is called I. What I call a brutal moment is that I am in conflict with that condition because it threatens who and what I am coming into that moment. It threatens my identity. So you would have to ask, is it really that life is brutal, or do I live from a brutal nature? You want to know why the world is the way it is? Because it's a brutal nature that has manifested itself on this planet in the form of human compassion, kindness, and all the rest of that nonsense that human beings throw around like. Have you ever had anybody throw a deck of cards at you when they lose? Right? All right. What do all of those states that we just described, second part, don't hurt your neck. What do all of those things that we just described, what do all of them have in common? Every last one of those states. Patricia.
A divided mind.
A divided mind. Anybody else? Resistance. Every last one of those things that we don't want begins with one thing and one thing only. We could go through the whole list. I'm not going to, but you can remember enough of your own list, can't you? Where does that start? It starts with, I don't want this. No, not me. Yes, please? Yes. Take a deep breath now. We're working towards something. So every one of these negative reactions is preceded by some form of resistance that negative action actually describes for us why it is that we're feeling that conflict. The question is, if you're understanding this, resistance to what? Here I am, and the majority of my day, even though I don't see it, and I'm just talking about being caught up in a negative reaction, you can have a negative reaction, and the remnant of that reaction will just roll along like thoughts tumbling along in the wind, and you won't even know that you're still trying to solve something that this resistance brought up inside of you, and your mind just keeps going and going and going and going, doesn't it? What resistance? What is that struggle actually with? Please stop. The struggle can't be with the condition. If you're following the talk, the struggle can't be with the condition. The condition doesn't exist anymore. Every condition is constantly being changed by the forces that first evoke whatever the relationship is between the observer and the observer. That condition no longer exists the way that you resisted it. If that's true, and it is, then what is the nature of that struggle? Anybody?
Its own conclusion.
A conclusion. We're working back towards that, Leah.
Living in the past.
This is getting closer. Living in the past, which is the same as conclusions. Roger? Comparison. Again, can't have comparison without being in the past. Chris?
My reaction.
My reaction. Whenever we look away or look for a way around, isn't that what happens when you meet a moment you don't want? I'm looking for a way around this moment, yes or no? And it all starts with a reaction that first has defined the moment, and then all of the thought gathers in associations and starts to produce solutions to that pain. So what we're looking for in the moment that we think with all of this resistance and what we need to reconcile it, we actually think this nature looks and says, well, what I'm trying to get free of is what you said to me yesterday, is the way you treated me, is the news. That's what I'm struggling with. That's what I want to be free of. Isn't that the conclusion inherent in everything we've looked at together? That is not what you're trying to be free of. And that's why you never get free. That's why on a daily basis, you're still in a constant tumult over whatever it is that you're resisting. And again, same feeling, 10,000 different things to resist. Then what is it? If it's not the condition, now you have to see this. One day you will if you haven't seen it already. If it's not the condition, what in the name of God am I actually resisting? My own reaction. Please, let it sink in for a second. It's not the end. I'm just getting to it. We're just peeling the layers off here a little bit. So you say this, they did that, I watched this happens. And I believe the is because of the but it's not the that produces the What it is that I've had a very powerful negative reaction. And that negative reaction insists as it passes through me that the pain of that moment is because of what it blames for producing it. That's all I see. So what we're actually looking for that we can't find because we're looking in all the wrong places, what we're actually looking for all of this time is freedom from the pain of our own reactions. It should blow your mind. My wife doesn't like that expression. It should, wait a minute, how can I be struggling for 10,000 years to be free of my own reaction? It's my reaction, isn't it? Is it? No. That's what you have to start seeing, that we want to find a way around the conflict blame for the reaction when we've been conditioned to believe this constant sense of conflict is our own. You believe the conflict in that reaction, me against this, you believe that's yours. You're pretty identified with it, aren't you? It's not yours. Now, quick, short breath. Well, what if it actually isn't mine? I know it's inconceivable. What if this hostility toward you, even as I'm speaking to you, what is this hostility that I feel towards them, this, that, or the other? What is this hostility if it's not mine? To whom does it belong? Because I sure feel it. I'm sure used to saying I to it, aren't you? That conflict, and it is conflict, isn't it? Only for us, the conflict is between us and the condition we blame. Only now I'm saying it isn't the condition we blame that produces the conflict. The real condition that's producing the conflict is a consciousness that's divided up into what it wants and doesn't want. Divided up into a consciousness that is set against itself and doesn't know it's against itself. But every reaction allows it to hide, because every reaction points out to something new that has to be changed for you to control so you can get back to your reasonable self. This nature is always looking, this is key and I'll build on it. This nature, this time nature is always looking ahead and behind itself in the exact same moment. Let it settle. First, what does it mean it's looking ahead? I have a doctor's appointment. Now, how many of you, when you have a doctor's appointment, think to yourself, I am so excited to go to the doctor because he or she is going to poke, prod, and ultimately do the one thing that doctors are paid to do, which is prescribe me something I don't need. No insult intended for good doctors. They're going to hurt me. I've never been to a doctor that didn't hurt me. Do you like the dentist? How many of you get up in the morning and think, oh, that was great. I'm going to the dentist today. And maybe if I'm lucky, I can have a root canal. Do you? That sounds ludicrous. So you wake up and suddenly your mind is filled with resistance to what? Come on. Resistance to what I imagine is going to happen to me. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I might go in there and he's not there and I get a Snickers for just getting there. Could be anything good. But the fact of the matter is, I'm filled with dread about tomorrow. So I'm resisting tomorrow, aren't I? What is the tomorrow I'm resisting? My yesterday. And that's the only thing that you resist, but you don't know it. Always looking ahead. Yes, no, good, bad, want, not want. And the fear that this mind experiences when it hears, sees, goes through some moment that is unexpected cannot exist as something to be resisted without that same mind pulling on some image from its past similar to the thing that it fears and then resisting the content of its own reaction to the content of itself. Do you know why we do this? Sometimes I have to make sure I'm talking to the... Why do we do this? Why am I sitting up here doing this with you? Really, I want to know. Why? Because I've spent my life an insane human being with no awareness at all of how insane I've been. Because I was raised in a lunatic asylum. I was raised by mother and father, grandmother, uncle, relatives, every last one of whom saw exactly what they needed to see and then took steps toward me to control or encourage me according to what they believed needed to be done with me and with their life so that they wouldn't have to have any more reactions towards our relationship. Everything to get rid of any reaction that produces a painful relationship. Please do see. So the constant conflicted experience, please, that I'm describing, do you understand this? A constant conflicted experience of the moment. You don't think that's actually going on. This nature is the conflicted experience. It's not the moment that produces the conflict. It's an unconscious conflicted nature that requires things to be set against so it can have something to be set for and continue its sense of self through time, which is what it's seeking because it's a time nature. It wants the continuation of itself, and it requires conflict to do that. Alternating conflict, pleasure, want, not want, so forth and so on. Are we connecting? How am I doing on time? Running out of it. All right. So, if that's true, then can we ask ourselves a question? I have to move through the material. The question is as follows. Okay, I can see that I am how many of you are, how would you say, wound up a little tight? You know, the world's about to pop. It's already popping. Hell's a poppin'. Great movie with Jack Lemmon a long time ago. Hell's a poppin', yeah, an appropriate title for the world today. Hell's a poppin'. So how many of you pop? Pop goes the evil. I pop, I go off. Whether I do it outwardly or inwardly doesn't matter at all. I go off because I am a churning urn of burning funk. I am a cauldron of thoughts and feelings resisting each other, because even as the mind resolves what it needs to get some kind of clarification on what it doesn't want, the moment that it becomes identified with what? A conclusion, because that's what we call, look, try to see this with me. I don't know if I'm getting through to you. Peace is when I come to a conclusion. It's all going to work out. This is why people love movies. They end, and you never see at the bottom to be continued, but you might not like it. It was such a lovely movie. Yes, so is your life. Because at a given moment it said the end, because your mind settled on something it could live with, and the minute it settled there, life said, aha. Let's see how long that lives. And it doesn't. And it's not because life is against you. It's because life wants you to understand a relationship that you're already a part of, in which you are never-endingly not being brought to conclusions, but to a new relationship with an infinite revelation that is constantly being renewed, called rebirth. So here's the question. Are we in agreement that there's a lot of resistance in us? And are we in agreement that there's a tremendous amount of pain connected to this resistance? That resistance always gives birth to some kind of painful conflict when we run into some moment, inevitable, I might add, that challenges it. Yes or no? So the question is this. Can there ever be a moment of resistance that isn't painful? All I know is that resistance is the same as pain, don't you? All I know is that resistance is absolutely identical with conflict. In fact, what I call my resistance is always to something that I'm in conflict with, one way or the other. Please? Take a nice deep breath. This is my favorite part of the talk. I have something beautiful to show you. Now I want to repeat that second key lesson. Don't try to bring it up. That we are, it's on the board here, but is this up on is that what people are seeing at home still? No, they're seeing me. Poor people. But the thing, it basically states that second key lesson, that the idea of conclusions are in fact the reason for all of the contusions, the bruises that we have. Because we don't know how to meet a moment that we don't want without being in pain over it. I'm going to show you something, if you're willing. First, I have to tell you something you're not going to like, but you need to know. Ready? Take a nice deep breath. There's never going to be the way... Look, why do I resist a given moment? Because I believe if I can reach a conclusion about it, I'll be done with the resistance. So human beings are never-endingly trying to find a way to live a life without resistance. That's what we call an ideal life. There's never going to be a life without resistance in it. That's a dream of an unconscious nature that as it dreams, it creates the resistance to the experience it has that follows that idea all the time. How can I be free? Oh, here's how. Conclusion. Then the conclusion produces the next state of resistance. That resistance proves I have to think through a little more clearly what I need to do, so that if I finally think enough, I'll be liberated from the painful state of resisting the things that I do. That's what we do with our life. That's what all thought is about. When we feel the pain, this is a transition. When we feel the pain of some resistance, it's because what? We see the evidence that someone or something is opposing us. And then we struggle accordingly to overcome what has come over us, right? Now listen, our perception of that moment at best is incomplete. At best, our sense of resistance, including the sense of self that's attached to it, is not just misunderstood, But that misunderstanding gives rise to the conflict that follows. I want you to look at me. Watch what I'm going to show you. You want a moment without resistance. I'm holding up a branch from a tree that has dropped its leaves. You can all see this. Why does it look like this? Why does any branch, any tree, any bush, any flower, why does anything that grows out of the ground, any natural creature, why does it look the way that it looks? Well, you know what I'm talking about, but I don't want you to just guess at this. I want you to actually see it. This branch on a tree, like everything else, what is it doing? Why is it going up? What's it doing? It's reaching for the light. It's reaching for the life that it needs in order for it to continue growing. Yes? What you can't see is that if it was just the tree growing towards the light, every tree would look like that. There'd just be all this stuff going straight up in the air. Every form would be the exact same form. So here's the need of this tree to reach for the light that gives it life. And it is forever, that need is forever being resisted by gravity. So there's the need, there's the gravity, there's the resistance. And when the resistance meets the need, then the need is slightly turned. The need can't just go in a straight line. It is met with something that insists by its force that what it is acting on, that it becomes part of and a reflection of the relationship between the need to rise and the gravity to come down. So here, and not only that, but what is imagine the tree going, I hate gravity. God, I hate this. I hate that my skin is sagging. I hate that I can't do and be and move and run. I hate all of that. Why? Because I've reached the conclusion of what it means to look right, be right, do right, and I refuse to recognize I'm incapable as I presently am because of my level of understanding to realize that every bit of gravity that shapes the tree strengthens the tree that it acts on. That the wind that the tree resists ensures that the root of the tree grows stronger. And so it is exactly the same thing in scale with the development of the soul. It is constantly being acted on by forces that the nature, called this unconscious mind, has no understanding at all ever in relationship to the development of spirit in a human being. All it knows is that it's not supposed to be like that because I know how it's supposed to be. If you had the faith of a mustard seed, then you would understand that there's no moment in which, by the grace of the divine, something isn't resisting you, but not you resisting that which is growing in time. And as that resistance mounts the way we are, we don't think to ourselves, do you ever think to yourself, there's a lot of benefit with me hating this moment? I'm telling you that there is tremendous benefit in the fact that you can be aware of resistance. But the absence of understanding the nature of resistance turns that resistance into a constant conflict with life that is constantly trying to strengthen the human being, not bring about the end of what that person believes they have to be happy. Gravity defies the need to rise. Gravity defies the need to Gravity defies the need even at the same moment that it supplies what the soul needs in order to be stronger, wiser, in order to discover the truth of itself. How would I even suspect that as part of creation, does creation have a conclusion in it? Nature never comes to a conclusion. Everything about nature is reborn. And why is it reborn? Because there's always something active, something timeless, working on something in time, something that has been created, so that that which has been created can be in relationship with that which, as it defies the wish, answers it at the same time. This is something alien to most human minds. How can something that defies my wish be that which fulfills me? Because only that way do I understand that this wish belongs to the past. This wish belongs to an incomplete nature that is still angry because someone or something happened to it, and it doesn't know what to do about that. So anything that even remotely resembles that moment is immediately relegated to a consciousness that knows nothing other than to resist that moment. Please? Here's something, if I can get through this. I can. A new understanding of that beautiful passage in the New Testament, and there was really a lot more than this, but that's all I have time for. You can't serve two masters, for you'll love one and despise the other. I've spoken about this at great length, haven't I? And I've said often that the two masters aren't really two masters. They are an unconscious nature that, without it knowing so, wants and not wants at the same time. So the minute it wants something, by the nature it identifies with it, it doesn't want anything that challenges its conclusion that this is what it needs to be free. So I don't want this. Why? I've reached the conclusion this is the source of my problem. And once I reach that conclusion that this is the source of my problem, all I have to do is just listen to the nature that reacted, point to where I have to go to reconcile this, and I'm good as gold. Except there's one problem with that. That nature is insatiable, as Christ called it, mammon. I want you to see it in a new light now. This nature, these two masters, is an unconscious nature that lives in the past and the future at the same time. It doesn't want what it sees coming because it wants what it had in the past. Or it doesn't want what it had in the past and so imagines what it needs in the future. So it's a time nature. That's the two masters. A single unconscious nature that in order to continue the sense of self that it's so reliant on to continue itself must have the time it doesn't want and then the time it will, or the time it's afraid of because of what happened in the past. So it is in an endless state of comparing what it sees as the moment to what the moment is defined by itself as being. It is an unending conflict. It is the true purgatory. It is the true purgatory. A mind that never stops wrestling with the very thing that it concluded before and that now must resist because it threatens the continuity of itself. So it's fighting all the time to do what? To get past resistance. But if I understand something about the nature of resistance, then I can begin to have a completely new relationship with the moments that this consciousness goes, no, I don't want that. Do you ever have a new moment when something in you says, I don't want this? Or is the new moment the new plan to get rid of what you don't want? So we live without knowing these two masters. Constantly compares what it's identified with, attached to in the past, to its own assessment of what the moment means in the future. And the only way that nature knows the meaning of the future is by describing it from the content of its past. So it's killing itself to give itself life, a sense of life. It literally is killing itself to give itself a sense of life. Can you see that with me? Nice deep breath. The business of the past, it's not your business. What would you think about without the past prompting you to try to escape the pain, the fear, the worry, the anxiety in it, or the promise of it? What would you think about? Are you able to, did I push you too far? All day long, I think. I believe that I am the progenitor of the thought. There's no one there by my name as a progenitor of thought. There is a thinker that exists in order to resolve an endless stream of thoughts about how it can escape the content of itself. It never stops. So I'm asking you, who would I be without thinking about the past? I don't know. Because all I know to do is to think about what I have to have, do, or go to. And I wouldn't have those thoughts if I wasn't resisting or attracted to something from my past telling me, here's how you get free. You want to be free of this pain, Guy? Just think a little bit more about what they said. You want to be free of this fear of financial insecurity? Just go ahead and get some more money. Do something. All it does is talk to itself. You know that what's going to happen a month from now? Oh my God. I better work through every iteration under the sun. Not seeing that every conclusion I reach, every iteration of what may or may not happen, the minute that conclusion is reached, the conflict is increased, not decreased. Because now I'm identified with something that can't be concluded and measuring it against everything my mind says once it's concluded that, yeah, but what about this and what about that? That's conflict, isn't it? See, most of us don't know anything about this conflict. We just live with it. And then people get power and pass laws to get us through the conflict that this consciousness creates. And it can't bring about the end of conflict because the idea of a conclusion that's going to bring an end to this suffering is the suffering it brings. The painful business of the past, repeat after me, not my business. The fearful business of the future. The anxious business of what others are doing or not doing. Are you getting the point? You are busy bees, busy unbees. And you just don't suspect it. Your own mind, creating the conflict that it does, then torments you into thinking about how to bring an end to the torment it has to have to create itself. That's what it does. And you just go, okay. Tell me I'm wrong. Now, you're not going to bring an end to this painful business of the past like that, nor the painful business of the future. You're not going to bring it to an end like that. But what you can do is begin to understand that you always have a right place at the right time in the order of things. The order of things is that nothing is concluded, everything is being created, including you in that same moment. And the realization that my suffering is because I'm outside of creation. I'm outside of my Father's will. That's my suffering. And I'm outside of my Father's will because my will is forever telling me what my Father's will is. It's always saying, this is how it should be, as if I'm the one who wrote into the laws of existence how things are supposed to be. It never ends, does it? How many of you get disappointed with yourself? Do you get disappointed with yourself? How many think you're I'm the worst thing that ever happened? I'm worse than old bread. I'm terrible. Who's talking to you? Something that is comparing a moment's impression of you that it has remembered to what it is that you remember you should have been and done, and now you can sit there and be full of remorse, wondering, what am I going to do? Who am I now? What's going to happen? Failing to see that every last thought you take along those lines is the futile attempt to escape resistance to your own conclusions, what your mind has concluded that you don't know you're a participant in. Close with this. What's my business? This takes a long, long, long time. That's not bad news, because it's an adventure the whole way. It's an exploration of infinite possibilities, not the constant conclusion of lost possibilities and then the next act to struggle to restore them. When you understand any of what I'm saying, you will understand that there is no moment in which the divine does not have unfinished business with you. What if you knew that every single moment that something comes up and you don't want it, that what you don't want is the action of something that is timeless, trying to point out to you something that is clinging to what is lost in time and doesn't want to change, and that your resistance to, your intention to try to bring about the end of that pain is the same as promising the karma of it will continue, because what needs to be changed is this time nature. There's no you. What needs to be changed is this time nature, this incessantly ceaseless thinking self, believing that it can think its way out of the stew that it creates every time it tries to escape its own experience. I talked about this a long time ago. The words came back to me. I really love it. The moment of resistance is really just the momentary experience of some unfinished business that God has with this nature, with this creation. He wants to change it. Now, when we're young, we love being changed because we're getting handsome, more strong, more beautiful, faster, healthier, so forth and so on. And that goes on until roughly the age of you can pick it for yourself. For me, it all went to hell in a handbasket when I turned 62. I don't know why. Because the body, what has been given, everything just starts to change. Now, when your body starts to change and you start to experience the changes, what's your reaction to that? Yeah, no, wait a minute. Wait, I need more time to get to the point where I stop resisting things. And I'm trying to tell you that this is the time to stop resisting things, but you can't stop resisting this conflict in your life until you understand what's creating it. The whole of this talk was to help you gain some insight into a nature that says it wants to bring an end to conflict by bringing about more conflicted conditions for you to believe will free you. And incidentally, as you work to cooperate with this unfinished business, with your own rebirth, which is moment to moment to moment, as that becomes clear to you as the real order of things, in proportion to that, you come to the end of your resistance to unwanted moments. Because now you understand the resistance to this unwanted moment doesn't start with you, but belongs to something that doesn't want to be changed, that doesn't want to see that it needs to be changed. And the clearer you see that, the more clear you are on what your relationship is with those moments, which is to allow the will of heaven to be done on the will of earth, so that something new can be born instead of the continuation of a conflicted nature that can't stand anything that doesn't line up with its expectations. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
All right.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now is our time for our live Q&A with Guy.
Hold on,
So-
we're
What are we getting?
an echo, no echo.
Hello, hello,
Hello, hello, hello.
Give us one
Give us 1 second.
Try it.
How do things sound here?
That's good.
Good? Okay, we'll go again. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to get started with our live Q&A with Guy. If you are on the GoToWebinar panel platform, you can go ahead and raise your hand. There's a little hand icon. Raise your hand there, and you'll be able to speak with Guy directly. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can go to the chat area and write a question. We have one question that came in from there already. You can also go to, if you want to speak with Guy directly, go to guyfinley.org/class, and you can log into the class and then talk to Guy. So whatever works for you, we hope to hear from you. We have a couple announcements before we get started. First, we want to remind everyone that this Saturday night, you're going to turn your clocks back 1 hour so that you are not late for class. Well, that you're not late for class. Yes, we're going to fall back Saturday night. So be sure you do that. Secondly, we have a lot of people that would like to make announcements up here. Secondly, we want to remind you that Deep Dive Wednesday is November 6th. So that's next Wednesday. That is when you would turn in questions. You're going to send them to guyfinley.org/contact. And those questions are things, maybe something you've read from a poem, another master, something Guy has written, something you've heard in a talk, anything you'd like him to do a deep dive on. These classes are so meaningful, and we really just get such new understandings in those classes. So again, guyfinley.org/contact. And lastly, we are a nonprofit, and we do rely on your tax-deductible donations to keep these free classes going. So we appreciate any support you can give us, and thank you to all of you that continue to support on a regular basis. And I think we can get started. Do you have any additional questions or comments?
I do, but we'll see if there's time after we work our way through whatever questions or comments come from people online.
Okay. Our first question comes from Chris. Hi, Guy. This is Chris. I've reached out to you a few times. My wife passed away suddenly and unexpectedly almost 3 months ago. Thank you for your input. I'm learning that my expectation of what life was going to be was something that could never be. How could I know the future? Although I can state this, it is very, very difficult to accept, as my wife and I were so very close. You have talked about our conscious and useless suffering. I'm trying to understand grieving versus unnecessary, useless suffering and what the difference is. In addition, how does thinking interplay with this? I find myself grieving and then wondering if this is useless suffering. Tough to differentiate. Thanks.
First, hi, Chris. I'm glad that you're still exploring. There's an axiom, a law, that what explores a moment by its nature has to be something not just greater than the moment it explores, but outside of it. Meaning that the moment can't explain itself. The moment can't see itself, but something exists within the awareness of that moment that is capable of understanding anew the meaning of that moment. I can't stress strongly enough, and you'll forgive me, Chris, if I digress for just a moment. I can't stress how strongly, how vital it is for you to understand your mind just wants to come to a conclusion. Just wants to get things settled. It wants to resolve whatever is bothering it. And that's all it knows to do. It doesn't know any other way to meet moments. You, here, wherever you are learning about another kind of mind. Only another kind, another order of mind can understand the order of mind that we presently live from. The order of mind we presently live from cannot perceive anything above itself. All it can do is imagine something greater than itself and then become identified with that and set itself up for the next thing that it needs to resist. So if you listen to the talk, Chris, and I hope that you did, I spoke at some great length about the illusion of a conclusion, any conclusion, because under law, whatever is being created has no conclusion because it never stops being brought into creation. It never stops changing. Now, one of the reasons that math and science and some of these disciplines are very critical, because on one hand, they give human beings a basis by which to not just come to conclusions, but in those conclusions to build on those conclusions, and through, for instance, the extrapolation of math into physics, into quantum, yada yada, design a way in which to understand the world so that we can act in that world and reach reasonably consistent results. And that's perfect for that level of thinking. But that same mind takes the possibility that it has to build things and build on things for the same as being able to build for itself understanding and security. And it cannot build understanding and security. Again, because of whatever it builds and stands on in terms of security, by the time the moment has been imagined, the conditions have changed and the person's right back square one again. Do you see it with me? So I had this thought, Chris, while I was listening to your question. It's a little dramatic, but it's true. I just wish that I was able to convey some of what I experience when I describe the things that I see. There isn't one photon that passes through a body of collected photons. There isn't one bit of light that enters into a form that as it enters into that form isn't being acted on in the most dramatic way. It is unendingly being, I don't like the word scrambled, but it is being changed. And what is acting to change it, that which is being changed in that moment, can't know anything about it. The flower doesn't understand the sunlight that lets it open its petals. Nor does a human being understand the nature of love, the nature of divine light, that allows it to finally blossom and outgrow this tight little bud of bitterness, fear, and regret. It doesn't know anything about it. And so for the longest time, all it can do when it experiences the entrance of that energy, not knowing that that energy is meant to be a circulation, isn't it a circulation if it comes in and enters something that initially resists it, but not resists it because it doesn't want it, but in that resistance is strengthened and changed according to its relationship. So now take that and if you will, if I had one of those if I was Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible thing, I'd have this board and I'd expand it, or Tony Stark, and I'd bring up on this invisible board all of these things where you could start seeing how every moment is just like that. And there's no moment that isn't like that. And because there's no moment that isn't like that, there's no creation that isn't suffering being created. Being reborn. There's no creation that isn't suffering being reborn. The difference is for us that we suffer the moment of that resistance because it doesn't match our idea of what we want to give birth to. Instead of understanding we're meant to be given birth by being present to that relationship as it tears into us, if you want, as it creates this disturbance in the soul, in every fiber of my being. And so there are these moments, Chris, that are greater than others in terms of this sudden, unthinkable collision. You've had them before, you'll have them again. There isn't a person listening or watching that for one reason or another isn't already aware of the fact that life seems to decide to give stuff to us that if we had our druthers, we would say, I don't want that. And at some point you start realizing you can't do anything more stupid than say, I don't want that. But on the other hand, I don't want it. Please. So what do? I have understanding now. This is my other notes that I didn't get into the talk. There's all these passages, Old Testament, New Testament, Bhagavad Gita, across the board. What was the story of Lot's wife? She lived in a place in Sodom. I'm just going to talk. In the opening of that little story, it says that Lot was at the gate of Sodom. He wasn't in Sodom, he was at the gate of Sodom. That meant there was something in Lot that wasn't part of this sodomistic, probably no word like that, city, this accumulation of degenerated thoughts and feelings born out of constantly resisting, and in resisting looking for new pleasures and finding new pleasures being denigrated by the addiction to them, so that they just get deeper and deeper. Do you understand that? So he's at the gate and two angels appear. And then the story goes through quite a long iteration, but in the end, and it is an old Jewish legend, it's not written in it, that the angels, it says that his wife prepared a feast, that they asked for this feast, but that she didn't have any salt with which to prepare the meal. Salt was always the idea of something that was preserved. Like the virgins without oil, she didn't have salt. She had nothing that was preserved in her that could preserve the teachings. And so she went and borrowed it from neighbors, the story goes, the legend. And when she borrowed it from neighbors, she told them the reason she wanted it was because there was a couple angels at the house. Now, what happens when you tell devils that angels are in your house? They come and they want to rape the angels. And the story goes, Lot says, you can't do that, but I'll give you my two daughters. Another spiritual story, not necessary. What's critical is that God's going to obliterate this consciousness, this divided consciousness, Sodom and Gomorrah, going to devastate this consciousness. But the angels say you can escape because you're a good person. We've provided a way. All you have to do is just head up this way, take your wife and family, and under no circumstances do what? Look back. Now, it's no accident that she's turned into a pillar of salt, because it was salt she didn't have to prepare the feast. But the point is what? She said she wanted to go, she was going to go, but she couldn't go. She couldn't just see what was ahead. She had to look back. And when she looked back, it was because she wanted to go back. And this is the state of this yes and no, of this love and hate, of want and not want consciousness. It's in time. It's stuck in time. It isn't that there's a you that's stuck in time. There's a consciousness that only knows itself in time, through time. Christ was talking to his disciples. I don't know exactly what the story was, but he said, well, one of them said, well, I'll go with you, but I got to go do some stuff first. And and then it says in that moment, and it even alludes to Lot, in that moment his soul was called for. You can't go back. You can't pick up the plow and put it down. There's 10,000 different ways in which the teachings point to this relationship, the product of this unconscious nature that is endlessly producing what it wants and doesn't want and never understands. It's both sides of the equation. It's both sides of the past and the future. Neither exist, by the way, without that consciousness, and in that consciousness, those things are illusions. So, Chris, closing my long answer to your question. The reason that you're discovering that suddenly you're caught up in thought, and that the more you think about this deal, the more you suffer, and the more you suffer, the more you ask yourself, is this useful or not? And you need to see this. You can be as happy, and I don't mean this in any other way than to speak it as purely as I can. I can be sitting having a cup of ice cream with hot fudge on it. I'm not thinking about my wife. I can be outside and see a beautiful day like I saw yesterday and be filled with beauty. And then something in my mind will remind me of the past. I didn't ask to be reminded of it. And when that mind is reminded of the past, it has a reaction to the images that were stored there, all of the content of its grief, everything that it's gone through. And then, in order to reconcile that resistance, it will begin to take thought towards what it has been brought into. And as it thinks more and more about the thing that it was reminded about, the more miserable it becomes. And you have to see all of this. Don't try to reach conclusions. Don't try to bring an end to your pain. Never try to bring an end to your pain. Ever. Instead, persist with your wish to understand it. You put your wish to understand that suffering, that grief, that animosity, that fear of the future. You put your wish to understand that in front of it, and you live with it. You understand what it means now. I need my attention, because my attention belongs to any errant thought that grabs it, bringing it into the past or the fear of the future. You do that, Chris, and you will see things that no one else can see. And because of the gravity of this particular experience, you will come out with understanding at an earlier age than most of us go through, given how desperate we are to avoid anything that produces that kind of grief or grievance. That's the best I can do.
Okay, we have 4 questions, Guy. We'll get started here with Virginia. Is this correct? If the past isn't my business and the future isn't either, then I must live in this moment?
Hallelujah, 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 you've got it right. Yes. And the beauty of this, Virginia, is that as you see exactly what you've described, not my business to live in the past, all I do is get pummeled there. All it is filled with regrets, and then those regrets give rise to promises in the future, and then I go live in the future with the conclusion that this is absolutely necessary for my contentment, and now I'm beat up by everything that challenges what that mind has arrived at. If I actually start seeing, remember the game of Pong? Maybe some of you are probably too young. When I was a kid, there was this stupid game, and it was a little electronic game, and they go boink, and then you have a little paddle, boink, and you put it back to the other side. There was a line. And you can't playing against yourself. The boink, boink, and then each boink would speed up the boink. So they would go boink, 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 and you get panicked trying to win a game that you can't win, because you lose even if you win. That's exactly what this mind is like. Boink. When you see that there's no point to the boink, huh? I'm on it now. when you see there's no point to the boink, the purpose of that moment has been answered. Make a QP for it, Join.
Okay, next we have a question from Donna.
The mind can't quiet itself. It has no interest in the quiet it imagines. You can only see how painful it is to live in that noise and then believe that something in that noise knows where to find stillness. It doesn't.
Donna asks, how do you deal with your brain that is used to dealing with resistance? How to slow it down and focus on living in the now?
Donna, simple question. Is the feeling of resistance and being in conflict with the moment a happy feeling or an unhappy one? Answer for Donna. Is the feeling of resisting and being in conflict with whatever my mind is dealing with, is it pleasurable or painful? Now, if I actually see that my mind produces the pain that it blames on someone or something outside of me, then I can stop thinking about what to do with the problem, because I realize now the problem is that I'm asleep in a mind that keeps dreaming up its own future and painful past. If I see that, Donna, I don't have to know how to deal with resistance. I'm using resistance in order to release myself from the consciousness that creates it. In short answer, if I'm suffering, if I'm angry, if I'm afraid, if I'm caught up in some kind of anxiety, I need simply in that moment to realize that whatever my mind is trying to get to or do in order to free itself only ensures, as I follow that I will get to live that again and again and again. That's what conscious suffering is, Chris. That's what conscious suffering is, Chris, is realizing that there is this great suffering going on, but that I mustn't contribute to it. Instead, I must become the observer of it so that I can begin to understand the nature that's creating it. Then you have a chance to transcend the unconscious suffering and turn it into something that serves your soul in terms of its development and fulfillment.
Okay, a question from Iz on YouTube. I'm having trouble making the decision whether or not to move back home to where my family lives after 6 years away. Should I just make the decision? Part of me says I'm waiting until it's perfect, when I've sold as many things as possible, when I've said my goodbyes, when I've gotten more experiences first. While another part says, don't wait, go unemployed, get an apartment first, etc. Is being stuck at the thought enough to know it's a yes? Why am I making this so difficult?
Ellen, why do you make so many things difficult? No, that's no. Terry, why do you make so many things difficult?
Because I give my attention.
No. Anybody? Wayne?
Because I want to know.
Because I love the difficulty. Because I know quietly I can say yes and I'm going to be beat up to hell by no. And then I say no and then yes is going to go, wait a minute, you're leaving this out. Boink, boink, boink. Who would ever thought I'd use that in a talk? And if you'll forgive me if it's required, stop asking people what you should do with your life like that. Because whoever tells you yes, when you find out that didn't work, you're going to hate. Whoever says no, and then you find out you wish you did, then you'll despise them. You will love one and despise the other. It's built into it. I'll give you a way to look at it. Just make up your mind. This is big. You know, I'm not going to think about this for 48 hours. I'm going to let it rest. I'm going to give it room. These are all fancy words for what you're unable to do. Because if you decide is that, you know what, I'm driving myself nuts, so I'm going to get out of the car. You decide that, and then you find out, sweet Jesus, I'm not out of the car. I'm still a captive of thoughts that are tormenting me. I said I'm just going to not think about this. Something won't not think about it. Now you know something about that nature. You know what you can listen to and what you can't. And every little bit of clarity about that unconscious nature as it's driving you crazy will give you a little bit of more, it'll make a little more imperative for you the need to be the observer of this consciousness, not the one serving it from time to time, from want to not want. Lastly, when you do make a decision, don't go back and second guess yourself. You make a decision, it's done. This is something nobody says to themselves anymore. We never say it's done. We say, I think it needs a little more cooking. It's done. It's done. And then you get to see that it was never done in that mind of yours. All that it wants to do is revisit, revisit, revisit. You learn a little bit more, you see a little bit more clearly. The more clearly you see, the nearer you are to having a mind quiet enough to see itself and act appropriately. There's more?
Last one.
Okay.
Last question from Jordan. Confusion over these truths not being clear to me, yet the more I try to understand your talks and teachings, the more I seem to not understand. How can I accept not understanding and be happy not understanding?
I don't understand. Look, I can't answer your question the way you've posed it. I can tell you this much, Jordan, beyond the shadow of a doubt. This confusion and this feeling I don't understand is exactly what your mind wants to do with what it sees these teachings will lead you to. It has no interest in leaving Sodom. It has no interest in leaving self. No interest. And so when it starts putting together, and it's just part of the journey, it's not a problem. That's the beauty. If you love the truth, you can't have a problem that truth won't eventually solve for you if you just stay in the witnessing, watching it closely enough. The more over these truths clear. And so here's the thing. So I'm listening to you more, and I'm understanding you less. Well, why are you listening to me? This is the essential conflict, don't you see? Something in Jordan is drawn to wanting to understand this constant sense of conflict and resistance to anything that challenges the image or ideas he has of himself. It's there. He was given that at birth. But what he was born into in this world that overlays that presently doesn't want anything for that to come forward. It doesn't want the first to become last and the last first. It wants to remain first at all costs. And in order to do that, it just has to paint the whole bloody thing with confusion and say, see, there's nothing for you to understand here. Only you know that there is. Good night.